We're going to talk about units of area and volume first, and then we're going to talk about converting amongst them. I don't do numbers any better than I do words. Let's go. So we've got, describe to me if I was to complete this box with my, I've given up on the ruler. If I was to complete that box, what is that? It's a square. How long, how big is a square?
1 meter.
So that is 1 meter by 1 meter, correct?
Yes.
So if I was to describe that area to someone, I would call it 1 meter squared. So I times my height or my length by my width. And I also do that with my units. What's a meter times a meter? A meter?
Square.
What's a centimetre times a centimetre? Okay, what's a metre times a centimetre? Can we do that?
Yeah.
If I convert them. Good. But I like to work with units that are the same, correct? Now, that is an area. And how do we know we've got an area? If I give you a value, I want you to put your hand up when you think I say an area. 5 centimetres. 15 centimetres squared. 30 centimetres cubed. 5 metres squared. How do you know? Squared. So all our units of area, so I want you to write area squared units of, what about a metre per second squared? Is that an area? What about a kilojoule squared? So units of, squared units of distance, I'm just going to use length, but yes, you're, in terms of physics, you are correct. Squared units of length. Let's say now I have this 1 by 1 metre square, and I'm really good, and I can bring it out into the, because that's, what? How many dimensions is that? 2D? What's the difference when you go to the movies and it's a 3D picture? Stuff comes out of the picture, freaks out old and young people. So if this was to come 1 metre out of the board, what would that be now? Is it still an area? It's a, and the unit would be 1 metre times 1 metre times, which would make it 1 metre cubed. So volume equals a cubed unit of length. So anytime you see a length cubed, you know it's a volume. Anytime you see a length squared, you know it is a area, an area, not a area, an area. Now, let's talk about a misconception. And I'm going to give you straight up the best way to avoid the misconception. But sometimes it is unavoidable, and we need to understand how this works. Often, I will see kids get their answer in centimetres cubed and try and convert that to metres cubed, or centimetres squared and try and convert that to metres squared. By definition, what is a centimetre squared? It is 1 centimetre up by 1 centimetre across. So that is a centimetre squared. Happy with that? Probably a little bit bigger. How many of those could I fit in that shape? Guess. How many of those could I fit in that shape?
10,000.
Who thinks I could fit 100? Who thinks, easy. Who thinks I could fit 1,000? Easy. Who thinks I could fit 5,000? 6,000? 7,000? 8,000? 9,000? 10,000? I think 10,000. 11,000? How do you know 10,000? Well, let's ask this question. How many could I fit on that row there? 100? I could fit 100 of these little blocks, boom, 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 all the way up, correct? So how many blocks do I have in one row? How many rows do I have? 100 times 100. Put that in your calculator. 10,000? Is that what you got? Same thing applies for our cube. If I've got 10,000 of those and I extend it out, how many am I going to fit in? Times it by 100 again. So it's going to be 1,000,000 centimetres cubed. So if I had this box and it was on the ground and I had those little ones, I could fit 1,000,000 of those inside. So you need to be really careful when you're converting between units. Now I told you I'd give you the hint to avoid it. What's the best way to avoid this being a problem and avoid having to think about it? And having to divide our final answer by 10,000 or times our final answer by 1,000,000. How can we avoid that?
Convert at the start.
Convert at the start, perfect. As long as my units are the same at the start, my volume and area equations are all good. Sweet? So it's only when it asks you at the end to convert it that you need to be aware of this. Otherwise, my advice to you is convert it at the start. We've got calculators, don't we? We can deal with 0.3 times 0.7. That's easy enough. It is very hard to remember that off by heart. Cool? You guys can get going with that worksheet, or you can move on to the Cambridge stuff on Google Classroom.